Cosmic Frequency, Tuning into the Awakened Heart. This program is brought to you by Prana Luz Conscious Living. My name is Ana Lu and I am the founder of Prana Luz and host for the Cosmic Frequency podcasts. Our podcasts focus on three main pillars: spirituality and social and environmental awareness. Our topic today is returning to natural sound, and our guest is Shervin Boloorian. Shervin launched Bali's first sound healing events program in 2012, which has since served 10,000s of guests in over 13 countries worldwide. He's a celebrated vocalist, live natural music artist, certified sound practitioner, and accomplished sound healing teacher and trainer. Shervin combines musical skills and heart-opening vocals as sound medicine for deep relaxation, peace, and connection to the unseen world. He's also a recording artist, releasing his third album, I Hear You, Mother Earth, on April 22, 2020, in response to the COVID-19. His prior album, a collection of Rumi wisdom and Sufi-inspired songs, was endorsed by worldwide bestselling Rumi translator and poet Coleman Barks. With over 10 years of experience as a sound therapist, Shervin trained under Fabienne Maman, one of the pioneers of sound modern therapy, becoming a certified sound therapist through the Tamado Academy. Shervin has featured presenter at Google offices in Singapore, MTV Europe, and various holistic festivals. He normally presents live music events and workshops at the Yoga Barn in Bali and leads multi-instrumental sound healing trainings and private sessions in Ubud, where he's based. He quotes, "I love making music that brings you home to what feels natural and peaceful, no matter what you're going through. Comforting, organic healing sound awakens the listener to their inner healer, their innate wisdom and creative action." So hello, Shervin. How are you?
Greetings. How are you, Ana Lu? Bali, I'm enjoying the beautiful energy here. I'm sending it all to you, and I'm very grateful for this opportunity.
Thank you so much. I miss Bali too, and it's great to connect with you through this conversation. So I'm very glad and flattered to have you today in our conversation.
My pleasure.
Thank you for being here. It's such an important and amazing topic, and I couldn't have chosen a better person to speak about this than you. So I'm very excited today to connect with you.
Thank you. I'm excited too. Thank you. I'm really excited to be part of your show, and I'm really looking to connect to your listeners and to you today.
Thank you. So maybe, Sharon, if we want to start a little bit by sharing with the listeners about your personal path, what brought you to connect with music and sound, and you shared with me that you had a different job before, you had a different background, and I'd like to hear a little bit more about that.
My whole path that led me to sound healing was so much about my own healing journey, in the sense that I was in a place where nothing else was really working for me in terms of the main medical pathways that people go in order to deal with physical problems, emotional, mental, and so on and so forth. And I discovered that the world of energy created such a beautiful complement to all the other therapies I was receiving in the mainstream. And it was the missing piece, so to speak. It was the underlying wisdom that can only be transferred through, what I call the art of listening, and really being able to listen to the energetic messages that are coming through when you can't understand why it is that a particular injury keeps recurring or certain situations keep popping up in your life over and over and over again. And it just takes a little bit of reframing everything and looking at the energetic influences inside you, around you, And then you can really start to make those changes in your life and start to bring yourself out of the negativity. And that's what happened to me. I had an entirely different career. I was working as a policy advisor in Washington, D.C. And that was my bread and butter. That was what my value was to the world. And it was really not what I was meant to be doing. And I'm sure many of your listeners, and maybe even you, can really relate to this when you're in a world where you feel you feel like you're rubbing against what it is your true offering and what you're truly about in the world. And it's starting to create these waves of uncertainty inside. You start to feel like you're getting ill, or you start to feel like you're kind of coming up on different types of scenarios that just aren't for you, and you still want to pursue it because of career, because of your paycheck, and so on and so forth. So I had to make some really tough changes and some really tough decisions that have everything to do with the essence of sound therapy, and that is truly listening to what you're about and allowing yourself to fit with the energy around you in a way that is harmonious.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I totally resonate with your personal path, and I believe many of us. And tapping into this energetic messages through listening is such a wise advice that sometimes we tend to overlook, right? And it's an invitation also for this. And how specifically did you start getting into the sound healing? I mean, you're such an amazing musician. You play what do you not play? you play every single instrument. And as far as I know, right?
Well, I don't play the violin yet, but maybe one day. I hope to get to the violin at some point. Yeah, it's a lot of different instruments that I play, and
you told us a little bit of how you changed your path and started connecting more with listening and tapping into your genuine path, what your soul wanted and desired. And how did that path took you to music and sound and healing?
Well, I was learning with a wonderful shamanic teacher. Her name was Robin Rice, and she was in the Maryland area, which is just outside of DC, and I was training with her. I decided to train with her for a year, and this was the most challenging year of my life, but it also brought about the most changes. And in that time, I started to learn about not only energy, but also taking responsibility for my energy, and how that has such an incredible effect on changing the narrative, changing how things happen in your life and what things happen, what you attract, who you attract. And it was through that process that I learned that my personal way of connecting to energy had to do with sound, that was my personal way of being able to access harmonious energy through music, through sound, and through poetry. That these were the crafts that felt so much that they kind of stood out the most in terms of the way in which I wanted to share positive energy with the world. And so after completing that apprenticeship, I started looking to deepen my connection with energy, in particular the sound energy, and I discovered the Tamado Academy of Sound, Color, and Movement. And I was fascinated by the work of this academy because its founder and teacher, Fabien Maman, is one of the pioneers of sound therapy, and he is the one who studied blood cells and how they respond to sound vibration under the microscope. So the left brain side of me felt very enthusiastic and intrigued by this component. And then the spiritual side of it and the energy side of it, the color therapy, the work with essences, the work with tuning forks, the work with instruments, all of those types of things, the creative side of things, that was also stimulated too. So I really felt like I hit the jackpot in that regard, that I found something that really brought all my interests together quite beautifully. And his influence is still the primary one when it comes to the training that I've received and what I offer the world now almost 10 years later.
Beautiful. That's also how I felt when I met you. I also hit the jackpot, so I'm still hoping I can do this training with you. I'm so excited. So
thank you.
That's amazing that you had such an encounter with your words were so beautiful, the way you said it. You know, you found your way, right, to connect with this process of getting a harmonious relationship with the energy through sound and through poetry. That's beautiful. Can you tell us a little bit more about the sound and the vibrations? You mentioned this teacher was able to work a little bit with the impact of vibrations in the blood, right? So can you share a little bit with us, or those who perhaps are not so familiarized with how or what is not affected by vibrations, right? But we're all vibrations. But how can we learn more about this?
Well, I can certainly share the primary findings of his studies, which are fascinating. And you can find this all in his book, The Tao of Sound, which is a beautiful illustrated book, which not only goes into the principles of sound therapy and natural sound, but also the beautiful kind of the results of the work that he did in terms of looking at how blood cells respond to sound. The interesting thing was that of all the different instruments that he looked at, when he looked at sound and how the blood would become empowered, it's the blood cells themselves, the healthy blood cells, when they would receive sound, and he looked at different sequences of notes as well and different instruments. But what was consistent was that the sounds would create this empowerment of the blood cells. You could see that they would start to expand and revitalize and start to create these beautiful different shapes and colors that would come into the view of the observer. And not only that, he discovered that of all the different instruments that, and he looked at many different ones, that the human voice was the most powerful in terms of empowering these blood cells and giving them that vitality. And the human voice has a consciousness, and we all have a deep connection to the human voice ever since going back to the womb, when we could feel the vibration of the mother and the energy of the mother. And those types of vibrations, they carry with us. And so the voice is paramount when it comes to working with sound. And you know this because you work with mantra and sound yourself. And you know that there is something very special about the human voice, which even to this day cannot be replicated synthetically in a way that even a child could listen to the synthetic and the human voice, and they'll know straight away which one is the human voice. So there's something very unique. Each one of us has a different signature when it comes to our voices. And so if we can consider that the voice is our number one therapeutic tool, it can completely change our relationship with the voice, which is one fraught with self-consciousness and criticism and so forth, because it doesn't sound perfect. And the world of harmony is one that I believe trumps perfection. We need to be able to call in more harmony and let go of our need for things needing and having to be perfect. So that's the first thing. The second thing that he discovered was that the cells that he looked at were not only healthy cells, he looked at HeLa cancer cells. And he discovered that using a different sequence of tones, that he could actually disrupt and obliterate cancer cells. And of all the different instruments, again, that he was testing when doing this, and he did this at the University of Jusso in Paris in 1981, so a long time ago, he discovered that the human voice, again, was the most effective one at being able to obliterate these cancer cells as well as empowering the healthy cells.
Amazing. And can you share us a little bit, Shervin, about what's the background of sound healing or sound therapy? Like, I mean, of course, like our civilizations, ancient civilizations have used sound in such a variety of ways, right? Through rituals, through healing. Like sound and music has been with us throughout all our existence, right? And it did have like it did have a sacred power, and they were aware of the sacred power of sound. Yet what was the ancestral knowledge or wisdom? And perhaps how has that, or how are we trying to recover this through the sound therapy and the work you're doing?
Well, I think you're right. It's a really hard thing to trace to one particular point because it's so pervasive. It's so available in terms of so many different cultures, so many different lineages throughout the world have a connection to sound and music and the voice as a healing therapy. and you can go back to prehistoric times. And I think the main thing we can gather from that is that there is a universality to sound and music that makes it one of the most accessible forms of energy work, beyond the others, because sound goes back to the beginning of time and is woven in the DNA, and it's something that we can respond to, because even the sounds of nature, especially the sounds of nature, are where sound healing starts. Nature is the number one healer, and it hasn't changed over all these generations. It's still our number one way of coming back to ourselves and finding balance and harmony. You can just look at Ayurveda or Chinese medicine. These are ancient traditions that encourage us to go back to the connection with nature and the wisdom of nature to be able to find our balance, find our way again. And that's really essentially, how sound kind of became or started its path. And more recently, there have been people such as Hans Jenny, who was the first to really look at sound and look at how it impacts matter. And those people who are familiar with those videos on YouTube, where you look at what are called cymatics, and how the sound vibrations create these responses on this water or plates with matter on it, and they reorganize the matter into these beautiful geometrical designs. So it was that interest on modern level that started to get us back into kind of studying sounds impacts on as it is today. And there are many mystics and folks who are from the kind of the psychic realm who have stated that sound is the way of the future. Sound is really what we have to come back to get our medical world back in order. That it cannot be just the anatomical medicine. We have to start looking at energy, and sound, as I mentioned before, is the primary and most all-encompassing form of energy that we can all relate to.
I remember the work of Masaru Emoto with the water, right? And the particles in the water. That was also very beautiful, how he proved how the vibrations and different music, right, created different crystals in the water. So I think this is coming forth a little bit more into stream media, that people are becoming a bit more aware of this, that perhaps was seeing a little bit more paranormal or far from science, right? But science is now actually, how do you say, cooperating and confirming this, right? Which is amazing. I'm very happy.
And it's about time. It's a wonderful thing to see. And, there are people who are experimenting now with high-level ultrasound and how to kind of break up cancer cells using pure sound, and breaking up kidney stones using high-level sound as well. So, we're just scratching the surface with this stuff. And, what you mentioned earlier about the sacredness, because it does go back, just to this other kind of deep buried part of the consciousness. When you think of how sound affects us, it goes into a very deep level, and it's something that mothers have done to sing to their children, for example, since the beginning of time and before that. So this part of it is what fascinates me the most, is there's this formula brought up by a modern sound healer known as Jonathan Goldman, and he says it's the intention plus the frequency that equals healing. And I would add into that formula the addition of presence. Intention plus frequency plus presence. That's something that really makes a huge difference, and that comes, from all of these things that we're learning about in the modern age that bring us back to what the sages and the mystics have told us about centering, about finding your meditative stillness inside, about being able to tune in to what's around you and who is around you. It's an entirely different craft than playing an instrument as an entertainer, where you're there to try to, show off your technique and try to get people to, to kind of be wowed by how good you are as a musician. If you can get into that place of presence and intention, then the frequencies themselves can really start to carry and create a lot of shifts. And that's also what Masaru Emoto's work really demonstrated too, is intention makes a huge difference. And you add in a stronger intention, you add in some attention that is based on a real deep sense of connection to yourself and the world around you. And then you have an incredible formula.
Thank you. So it was beautiful what you were saying about the intention and being present. And when we connect with vibrations and sounds and the healing power of them, like old sages and in India, like when you speak about the Vedas and these languages that were so sacred, and they had a specific vibration of the words and the sounds that sometimes in some languages cannot even be translated, right? Because they lose the power. Do you believe that there's that this process of understanding a world of being energetic beings and it being sound and vibration begins with a process of awareness? Or what would be your perspective on this?
Yes, I totally agree. And I love what you said about these ancient languages and how there is something about these ancient languages that cuts through, and you don't have the same kind of effects that you do when singing in these modern languages. And it's why, people are telling me, Shervin, why don't you sing in English, and why don't you do your songs and your mantras and share songs in English? And that's the reason, is that there was this level of awareness in terms of the energetic property of what it is that comes through underlying the words and the meaning of the words. There's also an energetic quality to the sounds, that when you hear the word Devi Ma in a chant or a mantra, that these different syllables have a certain quality to them, that you can be able to try to, if you spend time really tuning in, that you can start to decipher and start to understand that this syllable ma, for example, which you find in all cultures all across the world, the word that connects to the feminine and the nurturing energy of the mother. How is it that essentially every single culture in the world has this deep connection to this particular phrase that has such a deep way of being able to invoke the energy of the mother? And that consistency is something that I believe that these ancient languages had a better grasp of than the modern ones. And so when I was training at the Tamado Academy, I learned about this discipline called Kototama, where it is the actual study of all the different utterances and what their energetic qualities are, and that you can start to be able to make beautiful connections to these different formulas through the mantras, that you start to realize what the energy is starting to create and invoke when you're using those mantras, even down to your name. And I believe that this explains why people go to India, for example, and change their names. They go from being called John or Jane or what have you, and they want to call themselves Saraswati. But, it's not just some weird thing that people are doing just because it makes them feel better. There's an essential energetic quality to this number one mantra that we have on a daily basis, that people refer to us by an energetic quality. Some people can't relate or resonate with that when it's the name that's given to them. So when it's something that comes from practice and a study of how sounds work, then it's a totally different type of experience with all the different energies around you. And you're right, your awareness changes when you start to pay attention to these things.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I noticed it, Shervin, when I offer the kirtans, when we always set an intention, and perhaps, like you mentioned before, some people are not familiarized with why you're chanting in Hindu or why you're chanting in, in Pali or Tibetan. Yet it's the power behind the words, right? And it's the intention we set, regardless of religion, right, or regardless of philosophy. Is the power of those sounds that we connect through in a matter of vibration, right? Which is the healing component of this practice, and of course in sound healing the same. So I would like to perhaps, I know you mix in your work the sound, with the chanting, right? And you mentioned before, very important, the connection with the harmony of nature. So I would like to ask you if you could explain to us how does it work? How can we start connecting through the sounds with nature, with the different elements?
Sure, yes. And, there are different traditions that approach things in different ways. But essentially, the one type of approach when it comes to sound and energy that seems to be something that most relate to or have been trained in or studied to some extent is the relationship between these energy centers, the chakras, and sound and the elements of nature. And then you can add a whole list of other things. For example, colors, certain emotions, certain organs. And so looking at these wheels of energy and looking at the vibrational kind of quality of the human body when it's in harmony, you can start to make certain conclusions. You can start to bring in the different instruments, the different tones, the different, even some people call them the seed syllables, which are meant to be related and connected to each of these different types of energy centers. So that's something that, works across the board for a lot of different folks from different traditions. And that's something that I also work with. I look at instruments that are all natural instruments, only instruments that are naturally made or have a way to be able to evoke the natural qualities and properties of nature. That those instruments can be subdivided into those different zones of energy. And so you can use those vibrations to be able to access the imbalances that might exist. So, for example, if you're dealing with the lower chakras, you're dealing with essentially lower frequencies, deeper sounds, the sounds that have a connection to the physical realm. And so you would want to be able to use those types of instruments that allow you to get into that space and to allow the receiver to kind of receive the energy of those lower chakras that can balance them. For example, the drum, the didgeridoo, the gong, and so on and so forth. These are fantastic instruments for people who are wanting to get more into their body, wanting to connect on a physical level. Many of us who kind of exist in the ether, we have trouble grounding and finding a connection to the body. Sometimes we don't even feel safe to be in our own bodies. And so it may be that we have to be extra sensitive with the use of these instruments in such a way that we can gradually allow them to come back into the body and connect to those energy centers and start to release the tension that may be preventing them from accessing those spaces. So that's just an example. And each of the energy centers, I actually break down. Some people have 7 chakras, 9, 12, and so on and so forth. I break it down into the most simplistic formula of just 3 energy centers. The Taoists use this system: the lower, the mid, and the upper. And I break the instruments, all the different instruments that you see that are used in the sound healing world. I divide them up, subdivide them into these 3 zones. And that's how I approach it. And you can start to get physical cues if you're trained enough to be able to be present that show you where a person's energy may be imbalanced and how you can use these sounds to bring the energy back into more of a harmony. Now, using musical instruments isn't really going to be the kind of penetrating way that perhaps tuning fork therapy that I have also had. But using the instruments that are musical kind of helps with the energy field primarily and acts somewhat the physical level. But when you're using the types of musical instruments that you hear in normal sound healings, they generally have a beautiful effect on the emotions. And you know that because you can watch a movie, you can watch any kind of visual, and as soon as you add music to it, it changes the entire mood of what it is you're watching. It adds an entirely new emotion. So the music is the master of the emotions. And on an emotional level, we can start to connect and start to release pent up stuff. We can open the heart with music. That's my personal way of accessing is the heart opening stuff. And then the other instruments can be used, the less musical instruments perhaps in the modern sense, but the instruments like the drum and the didge tend to have a better effect. Physical stuff and the instruments like the crystal balls and the bells and so forth, they're higher pitches, less dense, very light, and so they affect the upper chakras and so on and so forth. And this is all nuanced, and you have to get into it to really understand, what the sequences is and how to make it happen in a way that feels coherent. Mm-hmm. But that's essentially the way that you approach sound as a healing tool, is you look at which instruments create those effects: physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. And how does instruments penetrate on a physical, energetic, and etheric level? Like, I know there are some instruments, like you mentioned, the drums are really grounding, where the crystal balls are more in the higher chakras. But are certain instruments able to tap deeper into different layers, let's say, of the koshas, different layers of our physical, etheric, emotional, and mental?
Yes, the different dimensions of being, the different, people call them the different energetic bodies. Yes. Absolutely, it's possible. And the main thing to realize, though, is that most people don't have an awareness beyond the physical and the emotional and the mental, So we have to start there. And that's why music is just, everybody loves it. Everybody has a certain style of music or a way of connecting to music that is, unique to them. Like we love music across the board. And so it helps us to kind of make the first steps, part of the journey when it comes to understanding energy. If people are really drawn to bass, if they're really drawn to rhythm and the shamanic sounds, then chances are they have a deep connection to the physical part of their body. They want to be in their body. They love to dance. They love to move. They have that deep connection. And so using the methods of energy work, you can, particularly Chinese medicine, they say that where there's excess in one area, there's usually depletion in another. Mm-hmm. So you can start to then put the pieces of the puzzle together and see, well, maybe there's excess here, and maybe there's not enough connection to the emotional realm.
So that's a very good indication, right, for us to explore what music we like to listen and what we resonate with, to kind of like a self-evaluation of where we are at, right?
Big time. That's exactly right. And that's really what sound therapy, people don't really realize it, but that's exactly what one of the gifts are. It's that you can start to be able to discern, hey, I am really in need of music with piano and strings. I love the symphony sounds. I really, I'm in that place where I need to connect with my heart wants to bask in those elements.
And can I ask you a question? This is more of something that I would love you to speak about, because, there's all styles of music and realms of music, and classical and heavy rock and heavy metal and blues, jazz, beautiful, and tones and rhythms. Could you give me an example of how a reggaeton music, which is very common in Latin America, unfortunately, to my personal. And there is, for example, imagine this beautiful, mystical, Celtic sounds of higher notes. So how would those two differentiate, let's say, on all those dimensions of our being? What would be the different impact of those two, for example?
Well, I'm not really familiar with reggaeton so much. Is it kind of an offshoot of reggae?
And reggaeton is I'm glad you're not familiarized with it, though. That's a very good indication. Reggaeton is, it's very interesting. It's a very, very bass, primal sound, very, very easy melodies, and very, very focused on drumming, like boom, boom. It's kind of like a version of hip hop, but very, very deep sounds with drums and the same rhythm all the time, and very nasty words in general. But it's very interesting because a lot of people are driven to that primal sound of the drums, yet This is very, very easy to follow. It doesn't have any art in it, in a way. It's not like a
Yes.
like a beautiful composition or like a melodic sound. It's very primal.
Let me try to answer it based on the kind of the lens that I use, and that is that different ethnic traditions and different types of music throughout the world will have a particular instrument that dominates, or maybe a couple of different instruments that dominate. And in observing this, we can start to see what it is that creates the most energetic kind of stamp, the most significant energetic stamp as part of that particular style of music. And so, if it's something that involves a lot of drums and a lot of, primal energy, then we're dealing with stuff that has to do with the lower chakras. It's a very physical sounding thing. You can even look at language in the same way. There are certain languages, and I go into this in my training, that have a very dominant kind of certain vowel that comes up a lot. And if that vowel can give away a hint in certain, not just languages, but accents too, that there are variations that go within cultures and within languages and within nations, where you can start to pinpoint, there's much more of a physical element here, there's more of an emotional element here, there's more of a mental element here. And so with that type of observation, you can start to really get a sense of where the energies are focused in different cultures and different parts of the world. And you can tell there are certain languages that they have in the past, they even banned certain vowels because they would create too much of a certain response in the people, and certain instruments would be banned because it would be something that would create a response. Chanting would be banned, and so forth. So you see how society kind of influences the shaping of our musical and sound energy surroundings and environment over the years by just doing these little cursory studies.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing. And could I ask you, there's this understanding in music that the current musical scale that we use was invented by the Germans, of the little I know, and there's this other. So what is your perspective on that? What is your point?
The old 442, 430.
Yes.
It's a really interesting kind of analysis, and everybody will have a different way of approaching it. Some people say that 442 is something that kind of came out of Nazi Germany or was influenced by something that brings us away from nature, and that when you do 430 or 444 or different types of way of tuning our instruments, that you use a different kind of frequency to tune those instruments, that brings us back in touch with nature. And, I would say that there are arguments in both directions that make sense. I personally feel like follow what feels best for you. This world of sound is really about what harmonizes with, just like every other aspect of your life. You have to choose. You can listen to the same piece of music in 442 and in 430, and then you can make a decision based on what makes the difference. Some of you won't feel any difference at all, and therefore, it'll be up to you. But I don't believe that it's the sort of thing where, it creates some kind of devilish reaction in human beings to have a certain tuning or not. From what my teacher has told me, that when you're using certain frequencies, at least inside the body, that the body buffers those frequencies to try to receive what it is that it needs. And so, if it's a little bit off there or a little bit off here, that it won't make that much of a difference. The important thing is to follow a system that's coherent so that it's not all over the place. So that's the only thing that I would say to folks who are being, fed this line about whether it should be this tuning or that tuning. And really, I feel like it's really got to be up to you.
A very good point. Thank you. And it's also about connecting ourselves with that which resonates for us, right? That which vibrates for us, the same way as with people or with places or with everything that we encounter, right? Whatever feels right in our hearts.
Absolutely. Nobody knows you better than you. So you've got to, it's just a matter of coming into that place where you can tune in. And that's not something that many of us can easily do these days, particularly with the stress that's going on and the anxiety of what's happening right now. And people are kind of having trouble being able to find that sense of stillness and inner harmony.
Thank you, Shervin. I would like to also ask you, how does sound move through space? Like when you are like doing a healing, I've seen you doing like healing in bigger groups, with a lot of people lying down, or perhaps you also do one-on-ones with somebody. So how does sound move through space, and how do we connect with a person to direct its sound to where we want it to go?
It's a fascinating thing, Annalou. It's this sort of thing where, sound has a way of traveling through air and water, and what it does is that there's a manipulation of the air so that it creates these vibrations, and these vibrations vary based on the frequencies, and some of them are very low and dense, and some of them are very high. And so what's really interesting, though, is when you study, for example, people who have a blind disability, and how much more sensitive their connection to the world around them is, to the space, the spatial recognition, through that they can even use sound to be able to determine, through making clicks and various noises, they can make a determination of physical objects that are around them and be able to navigate those objects with precision. And that's something that is possible for each and every one of us to do. That's an innate gift, that we can be able to use sound to be able to navigate the world around us. And when you start to be able to use sound and music in a setting like a group sound therapy concert or session, that attunement really helps, because you will start to feel that there are certain energies in the room, certain bodies in the room that will be calling to you for a certain type of vibration. And that the feedback that comes back will then inform the way you play and how close you play, the volume that you play. But this is something that you develop over time, because I feel like it's, one of those things that explains why it is that we are all going towards the direction of resensitizing the human body. That the last couple of generations have worked to try to numb our senses by busying ourselves, by inebriating ourselves with alcohol or drugs or what have you. And this process now, with where we're going today, in the last generation or so, has been so much more about coming into reconnection with those senses and how those senses can help discernment, decision making, and pure connection with the world outside. It comes down to your vibration, but also how you relate with the vibrations around you. And that's really a key part of sound therapy, but just as a way of life. So I really appreciate that question. I feel that that's something we are just starting to kind of come to terms with.
Yes,
in the last
totally.
few years.
Totally. Thank you for sharing that. Very important to start tapping into that. Thank you.
Sure.
Shervin, could you give us some tips on how we can start connecting better with the harmonic frequencies of Earth? What are some things we can do in our day-to-day? Or, of course, it would be beautiful if everybody can have access to your music and healing music and therapy. But just on a daily basis, what are some things we could start doing to connect more?
Nature, Annalou. This is where it's at. I can't encourage it enough. Yeah. I'm one of those few sound therapists today that is really advocating for natural sound as a therapeutic tool. You see an awful lot of people with all kinds of digital setups and keyboards and amplifiers and all kinds of additional, bells and so forth to try to get a sense of how they can perfect the musical performance. But really, is it going to create a healing space? Do you feel that sense of expansion and connection? And that's really where the rubber meets the road when it comes to sound therapy. If you can replicate natural sound for yourself, and if you can start to do it enough where you can discern, okay, this is where I need more vibration, the lower vibrations, the mid ranges or the upper ranges, then you can start to just on a daily basis, basic toning with your natural voice, and a bowl can be there for you as one means of doing that. That's probably the most universal way that you can start to bring in natural sound into your life. But if you can be in nature, if you have the luxury to be able to connect to nature in some way, and the sounds of nature, the sounds of water, the sounds of birds, the sounds of wind in the trees and so forth, this has an incredible impact on hitting a reset button on the brain and just letting you feel the natural overtones of life. It's something that we have generationally come to a place where it generates peace for us. Over so many generations, our DNA responds. Even if you study the overtone sequence of natural acoustic sound, you will discover that mathematically that these natural overtones that come from only natural sound replicate the golden ratio, the phi ratio, the Fibonacci sequence, as it's also known.
Yes, exactly.
And this is the exact same sequence that is in our DNA. So something happens that interacts with the human consciousness when you start to experience natural sound. And it's something that I hear ongoingly, people telling me, I come away from your sound therapy, it's different from the other ones I go to. I'm able to sleep at night, I'm able to rest, my nervous system is peaceful. How is it that you're doing that? And it's always the same answer. It's because I primarily use natural sound. And so coming back to that place is something that we are in need of doing, which is the exact opposite, perhaps, of where our technological realm is taking us. But I feel like we can have both. I feel like we can create a harmonious space where we carve out time and energy for natural sound, and at the same time, we're able to do what we need to do on a day-to-day basis to keep up with our demands.
Yes, it's beautiful what you said. And for me, it's like our innate nature, like we are vibrating energetic beings. So this is kind of like a reflection of our microcosmos to the macrocosmos, right? We already have it inside of us. So we just need to become aware of it and feel it, connect with it, right? In a deeper way. Thank you.
It's so liberating when we get to that point, because it's like, you get a break from all of the static that comes along with the technology world. And we don't realize it because it's a little, it's a subconscious effect on us. But it really, it makes the nervous system kind of high wired. And this de-stresses us. It unwinds us from that place of where the digital world takes us. And it's needed. It's a balancing force that we need more than anything today.
Yes, and totally agree with you. And also now, moreover, because a lot of people are in their houses and perhaps not even able to go outside, or they maybe don't have even a garden. They're like stuck in buildings, condominiums. So how to really start connecting back to their inner nature and the sounds, even from that little space, how to create this harmonics and wellness within an area that's perhaps not close to nature, right? It's also important right now, because a lot of them are limited to the opportunity, to the possibility to connect.
Yes, that's true. And when I studied shamanism, I learned shamanism. It's called urban shamanism, and it's meant exactly for that, for people who are in the big cities and who are feeling that disconnect from nature. It's something as simple as having a plant nearby you can make a difference. You call in a certain chi. There's a chi there that comes through, and you can tone to your plant or to your flowers or what have you. You can use your voice. If you get out of the mindset that I'm doing this because I want to sound like I'm a top 40 singer, if you get out of that mindset and you come back to a place where it's like, look, this is connection. I talked to you about the study that my teacher did, and there are other studies that show that the human voice has a huge impact. If we can get out of that prison of our own creation, that the voice has to sound a certain way, and we start to be able to shift our entire perception. You can just hum and send the vibration of your hum in a conscious way to all the cells inside your body, and that it has an aligning quality. That's one simple thing to do. I just put out an album as well, and it's all a combination of natural sounds, different recordings of nature from different parts of the world mixed in with natural instruments that I use in my sound healings. And then the other layer of it is I bring in these mantras and chants from different traditions from different parts of the world that are meant to be kind of evoking the energy of nature as well. And each track is a different element of nature. It's a journey through the chakras, if you like, or the different elements of nature. And so that's something that I wanted to put out. It's taken me 3 years to do this album because it is so unlike other studio albums because of the natural quality inside. And it's coming out right now during this time of the pandemic. I just released it on Earth Day because I feel like, this is a wonderful antidote or countering effect to the anxiety and the stress that we're feeling because of COVID.
Wonderful moment. Yes, totally. I will be sharing your information here on your album. And I can't wait to hear it. And thank you so much for doing this work and helping us reconnect with our nature and balance. It's very important what you're doing, Shervin. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Thank you, my dear. Appreciate you. Thank you.
Yes, and also I just wanted to touch back on what you said about empowering our voice and use that as a tool, like becoming aware that we have been given this beautiful instrument to connect with ourselves and nature, this instrument for harmony, for peace, right? And that's a great invitation. Thank you for reminding us that.
Thank you, darling. And just to let your listeners know, I was a Washington, D.C. advisor, and I was not in the world of music, for 10 years or 9 years, And so if I can bring myself to share my voice in such a way, just in the last 2 years, I feel like anybody can. It's not like I'm a trained singer. I'm not trained. I'm not at all. I never went to an academy of voice training or anything like that, a conservatory. This is something that's an innate gift. And just like everything else in our lives, if you just show up to it every day, that you can really start to develop that gift. And you can start to, with your awareness, turn it into a therapeutic tool as well.
Thank you for that invitation. Yes, I resonate with you because I also was in the corporate world and many times I was told that I couldn't sing, and I sing now. So
absolutely,
taking that step into empowering and being genuine with what you feel you really, it's your dharma, it's your calling, and how you can share from that space is beautiful, and it's honoring ourselves at the same time, right? So thank you for that. And would you like to tell us a little bit of the trainings you do and the work you do right now? Probably you're on pause, but let us know I know you teach at the Yoga Barn and you do so many beautiful things. So I would like you to share with people what you do.
Absolutely. I train people in facilitating sound healing journeys, multi-instrumental sound healing journeys. You don't have to have any background in music to do this training. You just have to feel like you have a connection to sound and music energy. In fact, it's often when I get people who are musically trained that it's more challenging because they have a certain mindset of performance and entertainment. And that to shift that can be a little bit of a challenge for those musicians. So don't feel discouraged if you don't have a background in music or sound. This is really all about the world of energy. And what I do in Bali is I have people come. I do 2 modules of training, 6 days for the first module, 7 days for the second. We go through all the different acoustic instruments. All the instruments are there for you. We train with each other. We do daily vocal practice. We do a gentle movement practice. And then we get into the different instruments. There's practice every day. We have a lot of fun. At the end of the experience, we do, everybody gives a presentation in groups to the rest of the group. And so it's really just a way to kind of get more in touch with sound and the world of sound energy, either for self-care or for, supporting others. The first module is that, and there's a sacred component to it in the sense that, that presence, that intention, there is that aspect of it that we can explore. And because Bali is as sacred as it is, there's beautiful places we visit here that can help infuse that energy of intention and presence while we're here. And that's the first module. The second module goes more into the details and more into your own individual gifts and how you each individually connect to the sound and the music, and how that works as a practitioner, sharing with others as a professional. And I bring in my 10 years of experience about that. And, we work together as a team. And it's just, you feel an incredible sense of bonding by the end of this experience. And you have the tools and the know-how, the wherewithal to be able to go out in the world and start practicing yourself, doing your practice sessions, and eventually doing it for the public. Well, that's it in a nutshell. I have a training coming up in August and September. God willing, it's still going to be in effect. And that's going to be August 20th to 25th in Bali, and then the first week of September as well for level 2. So if you have any questions, you can go to my Sound Healing Bali website and get more information about that.
For sure, I'll be sharing all your details, and I hope I'm back there to be able to attend. I had the opportunity to share a little bit with you last year on one of your trainings, and it was just fantastic. So I really highly recommend you. You're an amazing therapist, human being, and I'm just delighted to have this conversation with you, Shervin. So thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you, and I was so delighted to have you come and share a little bit to our group. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you, Shervin. Thank you so much. Is there anything else you'd like to add about sound healing or the connection to the natural sound, the natural world?
Yeah, the only last thought that I'd like to share with people is that, this is the direction in which it's not just sound. The direction in which humanity is going, even with this whole COVID outbreak, is to do with coming back to the basics, coming back to the simplicity and the natural way, the innate nature, the innate wisdom. And if you think about that, you think about the other types of modalities in the energy world that are starting to gain prevalence today. The raw food movement, the breath work movement, the yoga movement and the conscious movement. All of this has to do with coming back to the basics, coming back to what is there, and just kind of cutting through all that stuff that confuses and creates mental chatter. So just consider that there are those of us out there in the sound world that are still encouraging this, and please be discerning. If you're in a place where you're not feeling that, where you're not feeling that deep connection inside, where somebody's playing loopers and digitizations and all kinds of, funky layerings on there, which may sound great on a performance level, but really aren't letting you find that place of deep connection. Listen to that, filter those away if you feel it, and move towards that which really feels like it resonates with you. That's the only advice I have about this whole situation.
Thank you. That's such an important message to share with us and humanity right now. And thank you for your kind words. And the last question I wanted to ask you, because this podcast that I've developed, the main goal is to create awareness and consciousness on diverse topics, environmental, social, and spiritual. So I would like your input on what do you feel it is to be a conscious being, and how can we tap into this consciousness on an individual level to influence the collective?
I think it's a great question. It cuts to the heart of everything. And I would just go to my own training and bring back that word listening. Listening, it's what life is about. There's a great quote from Russell Paul, who wrote Yoga of Sound, and he says that there isn't a problem in the world, man-made, human-made problem in the world, that can't be better dealt with through better listening. That we are at a place where we have lost the art of listening. And as we get into a place where things are kind of like thrown at us and we have shorter attention spans, it's becoming less and less possible to listen on a soul level, let alone be able to tune into the decisions that we're making and the listening that's necessary from us when it comes to the work we're doing, the relationships we're in, and the choices we make in our life. So coming back to that place of listening is really where consciousness can change our lives and transform things. And music is one wonderful component of that, if not the most essential one, because how we listen to music and receive music can be a reflection of how we receive vibration in all aspects of our lives.
Thank you. Beautiful. Thank you so much, Shervin, for allowing us to invite these conversations for deep listening, for a deeper connection with the heart and nature and our essence as vibrating, energetic beings. So I really loved this conversation with you. Thank you again so much for your time, for doing this from your home in Bali. And I can't wait to see you again when I'm back there. So I hope that's soon.
Me too, Annalou. Me too. I hope you come back soon, and missing you a lot. And please take care over there. And I wish everybody a good, healthy return to the things that matter to them in this time. And I send you all my love.
Thank you, Shervin. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Shervin today, and I hope you gained a lot of interesting insights. And we'll be posting some more podcasts really soon. Thank you so much. Namaste.
Thank you. Namaste.
Yajamahi Triambakam